think that I'm going to go back to face your fears and do it anyway. There's going to be, and let me add to that because I don't want you guys jumping out of planes or off whatever's right. But it's a twofer. What part of it is follow your gut, listen to your intuition, right? If this is a thing, and if the thing holding you back is the fear, then face your fears and do it anyway because we all have these limiting beliefs. I can't do it. I can never be that good. I could, just fill in the blank. But the reality of it is, time marches on, whether you're doing what you love to do or not.
Hmm.
So, and I hear people go, I'm too old for that. No, no, not really. So whatever that fear is, whatever that limiting belief is, check it. Put it on the sideline, do whatever you're going to do because tomorrow's not guaranteed. Do something that fills your freaking cup up.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Michele Smith. And Michele started her journey going to college and graduated a year early. And while working through college, was figuring out what she wanted to do and saw a flyer, signed up as a telephone operator. Didn't necessarily have a plan, but looked for opportunities and then went and worked at a hospital as in the administrative department, and then went back to school and got some letters behind her name, and then got a master's degree and switched out of the healthcare industry into increasing employee performance and process improvement. And then COVID hit and decided to go out on her own. So, with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Michele.
Thank you, Devin. I appreciate the time and the opportunity. And like I said earlier, it's so funny because you mentioned process improvement, your process and the way your flow works and everything else. So I'm envious and I will emulate some of what you do. So glad to be on the podcast.
Awesome. Well,
Um,
excited to have you here. And so, yeah, maybe to kick things off. So, I just gave kind of a short snippet to a much longer journey, but why don't we rewind and unpack that a little bit and tell us a little bit about your journey, how it got started going off to college?
yeah. So I'll go back to it's been a minute. And so high school, like you mentioned, and it's so funny because before you and I talked, I hadn't really thought about all that stuff. There was an opportunity to graduate a year early, and in all honesty, I was kind of bored. So jumped in, took the opportunity, and to your point, I really didn't have a plan for my life. And as I look back on that, because I'm an executive coach, I do leadership development, also have a podcast. And so when I think about coaching leaders, I look back at my own journey and go, okay, where was I in this whole mix? Well, I didn't have a plan. What I did do is just as doors opened, I kind of stepped through them. So the opportunity to graduate a year early from high school, that door opened, I stepped through it. The opportunity, like you called out being an operator. So if anybody can remember Lily Tomlin and whatever it was that she was the PBX operator where she put the little cords in the cord board, that was the operator that I was. So there was
Hmm.
an opportunity to go to school and train for that. Pac Bell was doing it. I stepped into that. Um, got offered a job, was able to do that as it was like the last year before these cord boards were phased out to computer stuff. Moved on to other things rapidly because it became quite boring when it was just computers. Cord board, I had stuff to do. I'm filling out tickets, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm done now. So went on to that, a lot of different careers, a lot of it in analytics. I made the intentional decision. So this is something I guess I did intentionally, not to go to college unless I knew what I wanted to do with it. And so it was at the point I was an analyst at a hospital. I started in healthcare back in 98 and realized I needed more and I needed to be able to have a degree to be able to move up in the organization. So at that time I had kids. So luckily there were opportunities to go to college and work full time. I did that. when I was done with my bachelor's, and I think about stuff because there's an underlying theme of um, as you're a leader, we all are leaders to ourselves first, right? And so when I think about that, the leadership thing that I went through, I'd gone through an emotional intelligence boot camp, if you will. And one of anybody who knows me knows that I prefer bullet points. So I think one of the bullet points that I took away from that was this saying of face your fears and do it anyway. And I think as an entrepreneur, you've probably gone through it. I know I've gone through it. It's like, oh crap, that scares me. The whole idea of not having the structure and the everything around you. Well, I had that moment early on, and this is when I was toward the end of my bachelor's, commuting back and forth to Reno from where I lived. And there was a posting on the break room that they had there on campus. And basically, they were looking for speakers for the undergraduate class. And in my head, I thought, so what idiot, in all honesty, no judgment, okay, but what idiot would want to do that? So I'm driving home that night and I had a 45-minute drive, and I'm like, where's that coming from? And this is after the emotional intelligence thing and everything else. Well, it was coming from the fact that it scared the crap out of me. And who would do that if it's so scary? And I realized I needed to at least throw my hat in the ring because face your fears, do it anyway. So I did. Long story short, I ended up at each point ultimately becoming the speaker for the undergraduate class as each thing came back and they're like, okay, we picked you for this. Now you've got to go here. Another OS moment. Okay, let's step in. So
Now,
I
just
ended up
out
doing
of
this.
curiosity, so how did, or just walk us through, how did that fit in with, because you went off to the college and kind of what degree did you get and how did that, or slot in with that
Yeah,
to balance
so
everything?
yeah, so my bachelor's was actually in IT. I had a what I called a BISIT, right? Bachelor of Science Information Technology. And it fits right in with being an analyst. And my father was a computer programmer, designed electronics. And so all that, I'm like, okay, it's in my DNA, right?
Hmm.
So that's what I did. I ended up loving access databases so I could develop an access, which created at that time, mind you, this was back 2003 is when I graduated with my undergrad. So the ability to be able to develop an access was huge. Now you fast forward, there's so many other things that you don't need coding necessarily to code.
Hmm.
And Access was the first step into that because in the background it had SQL, so you could do tweaks that you wanted, but you didn't necessarily have to be full blown. That's your language. But when I went through that, it was this sequence of stuff. It was at the end of it. Still, I was not going to be a speaker or do leadership development like I do now. But when I look back on my journey, had I not done that, I wouldn't have been where I am today because I tested it. I went in front. It was scary. I think I blacked out, but basically don't have memory of it. But there were 1,000 people in that audience. And, I had a 7 to 10 minute speech at the end. I do remember that there were key points that people did laugh when they were supposed to. So, I'll consider it a success. I was up there, I did the whole thing. But when I look back, that whole thing of face your fears to do it anyway has served me as I've gone through all of this. Because, like you mentioned, I was at Sutter Health for 17 and a half years. So I started healthcare in 98, started Sutter Health in 2003, was an analyst there, then became a regional accounting manager. And so what that meant that supported some of the hospitals. We did the books for the acute care hospitals. Um, so my team did AIR evaluation. We developed stuff in access databases. So when I think about being an entrepreneur, I'm collecting all these skills and experiences as I go along, right? But still have the convenience of like living at mom and dad's house, right? So I don't have to pay my own rent. I don't have to worry about anything. I just do my job and I get a steady paycheck, but with my eye on what else is there. So went through that, developed all that stuff, became a finance director at one of the hospitals, completely changed careers inside the organization, which you can do in a larger org. So became a process improvement, lean consultant. So worked in a hospital, and yeah, so worked in a hospital, then coached leaders on strategy. So there was a lot inside of that as I went up that career ladder. And then became a manager of education and standards. So then I stepped into leadership development. All the stuff is I'm collecting my skills and experiences with this eye on what does someday look like that I can go and do my own thing, all the stuff that, if you will, fills my cup up.
Hmm.
And I had that opportunity in February of 2021 after COVID and everything else. So my last role there at Sutter was a director of the improvement system, had 16 direct reports. Anybody who's lived through COVID, which is all of us, right? Most of us, all of us listening. COVID was a challenging time, a time of growth and opportunity. I was ready for a change. And so that gave me the courage to go, you know what? I'm doing this. And that's where this is, executive coaching, leadership development, basically the stuff that fills my cup up. And I can systematically carve away the things that don't do that. So that
Now,
was a
one
lot.
maybe one question to follow up. So, I mean, to rewind just a little bit. So, you were working at the hospital, or taking on some new roles and doing that. COVID comes along. Was it, hey, this is a opportunity, I want to step out, or hey, there's downsizing, there's upsizing, that the opportunities that you were looking for went away, or kind of what prompted you as that came about to shift gears a bit, or to kind of or go a bit of a different direction of focus?
Yeah, good question. So it's a great reminder for me, not that I forgot, but because I was in healthcare and when COVID hit, a lot of healthcare organizations stopped doing, because of COVID, things where their operating margins were. Okay, the things that actually, don't result in negative money, but actually result in profits that offset other things.
Hmm.
It's true for pretty much most healthcare organizations did this. They stopped having elective surgeries. They stopped, all those things where typically profit margins exist. And it put organizations in a situation to say, you know what, we need to make radical changes. And so part of the opportunity with Sutter was a voluntary severance program. So it came around the first time. I'd been there 17 and a half years. I was a director at the time. And I said, no, I don't have a plan B, or like my daughter referred to it as a side hustle. I had nothing. This was my main thing. When it came around a second time, I thought, okay, so this is a door that opened once, it's now opening again. I actually need to look at stepping through it. And it was freaking scary to do
Hmm.
because I had the perceived security of 17 and a half years in an organization. I had all the connections with that organization, but I couldn't, at the core of who I was, I couldn't ignore the second open door.
Hmm. So now, how did you decide? So you say, okay, hey, first time the door came along, decided I wasn't ready to step through it.
Yeah.
Second time it comes along, said, okay, ready to step through it. Now, as you did so, how did you figure out what that door was? In other words, you can step through. It's maybe a good opportunity, but you still have to figure out what you want to do from there, or what's the next step. So, kind of, how did
Yeah.
you figure out what you were going to do?
Well, so there's a couple things. Luckily, I have a daughter who's self-employed with digital marketing, social media, all that.
Hmm.
So I thought this was February 2021. I thought, let me just take a breather for a month. My breather lasted 3 days. Like, because I'm not someone who can just sit, right? So my brain started working. I was talking to my daughter because I knew I wanted to continue because I was doing executive coaching. I'd been certified with International Coaching Federation. I've been doing that already. I've been doing leadership development in the roles that I had. And I knew that's the stuff that I wanted to carry forward. I didn't know anything else of what it looked like. What's the name for the business? What is all this stuff? If you're going to go get an LLC, you need a name.
Hmm.
So literally on a phone call, another open door with my daughter, I'm like, kind of, this is what I'm thinking about. And she's like, oh my God, boo, boo, boo. So we are brainstorming. She's looking up domain names and what's available as I'm kind of throwing stuff out there and landed on Better Possibilities. And she's like, Mom, you won't believe it, but that's actually available.
Hmm.
I'm like, of course it is, because that's my name. So literally all this stuff transpired, and then she puts together this website, builds everything out, and I'm like, okay, so now I guess I really need to do something like this. So part of it was, the LLC, the website, getting everything going, and then figuring out what am I offering? What do those things look
Hmm.
like? I was extremely, and the only word that I can say is blessed because I didn't. it's a double-edged sword when I say that. I didn't have to market myself when I first started because I had connections. And that's one of the things too, is look around at the people that you currently work with. Who are those people that if you go out on your own are the people that know you already, so you're tested, right? That can go, and if they can't use what you do, they know someone who can. So
Mm,
now all of a sudden you're being referred. And when you're referred, it's a totally different ball game than someone who doesn't know you from Adam. So I didn't have to have any marketing things other than I've got a website that people may or may not have gone to. I wasn't funneling people to the website. I started a podcast because a friend of mine said, and we're into year 3 now. She's like, I think we need to do a podcast. And this is someone I spent a lot of time in the room with before, in person and virtual. I'm
mm,
like, okay, what does that look like? Right. So now you need another name. I knew we wanted shorter periods of time. So again, my daughter steps in, helps because we got in this spin cycle. So if you get in a spin cycle a lot of times and just swirling, get a different perspective in. And it's almost like the Matrix movie. Oh no, actually the one I'm thinking of is Indiana Jones. Remember Indiana Jones when the guy comes with the sword and he's doing all this crazy stuff and Indy just pulls his gun out?
mm,
Okay, that was my daughter. My friend and I, Rocco, we were swirling about all this stuff, and she goes, Mom, what it's about? What are you? And she goes, What about leadership sound bites? Literally, the gun being pulled out, and it's like, oh, and we had spent days
mm,
trying to figure out a name. So start that. It adds credibility. It adds all this stuff. What else do you do with it? We're trying to give back and help.
mm,
So all of a sudden, it became real. To where then it's like, what does it look like to do your first contract and consulting thing? And I mean, all this uncharted territory that when you work for another organization, they have departments for that, right? And when you become self-employed, like you, I mean, people tapping into you and your expertise is awesome, right? Because I don't have a legal department. I have me. So I think that's the stuff and that you think that I think about that I was blessed enough to have stuff fall into place. My next evolution and what I'm going through now is what does it look like to actually get intentional and not look for open doors?
mm,
And so that's what I'm building out now is, how do I market myself to people who don't know Michele Smith or Better Possibilities? What does that look like? What does that funnel look like? What is that process, that flow? And when you're an entrepreneur, that stuff matters because right now I'm not maximizing my skill set because I'm scheduling appointments with people.
mm.
I'm doing manual follow-up. I'm doing editing a podcast, right? All the stuff that anybody who's been out there for any length of time goes, okay, you need to outsource that stuff. So that's my evolution now.
No, sounds like definitely a great trajectory to be on, and future possibilities and as well as present ones definitely and it's and one of those that are interesting that as you continue to expand you go along you move along and you start doing everything and you by nature you have to do everything to get it all done, and then as you continue to grow and evolve then it's so that you get those processes in place to get one thing less off your table or one thing that maybe you're not as good at so you can focus on those things that you really add as much value as possible. So it sounds like a great direction ahead and a lot of possibilities yet to come. So now with that, so now as we've kind of reached the present day of the journey and even hearing a little bit about where you're headed, great time to transition to the two questions I always like to ask at the end of each episode. So we're going to jump to those now. So the first question I'd like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What did you learn from it?
Interesting because you did give me a heads up. This isn't like a gotcha moment, right? And as I think through that, and I'm a glasses half full person. And I'm just laying the foundation for this so people can understand. I look at failure or stuff like that as a gift and opportunity. So when we label something as worst, right? I'm thinking, is there a worst gift and opportunity, right? That's where my brain goes.
Hmm.
What came to mind for me is there's been moments, and people might be able to relate to it as I've gone through, because this isn't my first entrepreneur thing, okay? If I got into that over the course of all my experience, I was self-employed before in bookkeeping and taxes in my early 20s, had that business for a while, was again self-employed. I was actually a service writer for an automotive shop, self-employed again. Okay. I didn't say pick me for service writing. All right. And bookkeeping and taxes wasn't, while I had a skill set for it, it wasn't a passion. And so when I look back at the differences or the things that I did before that I'm going to bring forward, I think one of the things is no matter what, and I'm sure you can relate to it and other people listening who are entrepreneurs, if you go to work for somebody else in corporate America, there's no way that that person, that job will ever put as much stress on you as what you're going to have being self-employed.
Hmm.
Because when you're self-employed, you wear every freaking single hat, all of it. It's all yours, beginning, ending of the day. I think one of the things saying that, by the way, and it's not a negative, it's just reality, right? Is that if I look back on the other self-employed entrepreneurial roles that I had, they weren't my passion. This is my passion. So I think one of the things before is it becomes a drudgery if for some reason you're in it in the entrepreneurial world and it's not the thing you're passionate about.
Hmm.
So for me, I'm going to call it the biggest learning is if you're going to do it, don't do it because, oh, it's going to make me tons of money, but I really don't like it. Make sure it checks the boxes. Is it something that you really love doing? And then how can you maximize your profit in that space with something that you love doing?
Awesome. No, I think that's definitely something, a great takeaway, something to learn from, and that definitely makes perfect sense. So now that transitions well into the second question, which I like to ask is, so now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Um, I think that I'm going to go back to face your fears and do it anyway. There's gonna be, and let me add to that because I don't want you guys jumping out of planes or off whatever's right. But it's a twofer. What part of it is follow your gut, listen to your intuition, right? If this is a thing, and if the thing holding you back is the fear, then face your fears and do it anyway because we all have these limiting beliefs. I can't do it. I can never be that good. I could, just fill in the blank. But the reality of it is, time marches on, whether you're doing what you love to do or not.
Hmm.
So, and I hear people go, I'm too old for that. No, no, not really. So, whatever that fear is, whatever that limiting belief is, check it. Put it on the sideline. Do whatever you're going to do because tomorrow's not guaranteed. Do something that fills your freaking cup up. So I think that's it, is the advice is if it's an idea, do your research, follow your gut, and then face your fears and do it anyway.
Awesome. I think that's definitely makes perfect sense and a great takeaway. So, well, now as we wrap towards the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, Michelle Smith. I'm also, the website is www.betterpossibilities. And I did not think about spelling the frickin' thing when we thought of the name because it stumbles me all the time, but betterpossibilities.com. Or email me at Michele, Michele. I just have one L. My parents wanted me to be unique. They didn't realize I would have done that on my own. So Michele at betterpossibilities.com. So there's a lot of different ways to reach out. Just chat. I mean, we can do a 20-minute discovery call. We can find out there's no commitment for anything, but let's just have a conversation.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, make a new connection. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So, with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been a fun, it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you other listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be guests on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So, just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Michele, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg
Thanks,
of your
Devin.
journey even better than the last.
I appreciate it. Have an awesome day.